My husband and I have 5 kids, and our 2 youngest are autistic. And out of my kids, I have Simon, who has autism, Ezra, who has autism and ADHD, and I've got some kids with ADHD as well. And today we'll be discussing the differences between ADHD and autism. Meet Simon. He's our 4-year-old who loves cars and loves trains. He's very social and he loves going to preschool. He's also diagnosed with level 1 autism. You can see Simon's first day of preschool right here. It's super cute. Meet Ezra. He's our 8-year-old. He's been diagnosed with apraxia of speech, ADHD, autism, and possible OCD. He is a really fun kid who is so happy. He likes chords and spinning with chords. And even though Ezra is nonverbal, he's learning to communicate through spelling and through pointing at pictures on a tablet. At the end of the video, I'll share with you one similarity between ADHD and autism that may throw you off. You'll be surprised. These are examples from our home to yours. Please remember, if you want to know for sure, get an assessment from a professional. The first difference between ADHD and autism is novelty versus routines. One major difference is how your child feels when their schedule and their daily routine is interrupted. Maybe a change happens that messes up their whole schedule. They have to do something different and not what they planned on doing. How does your child react? Are they the kind of child that is kind of easygoing? Are they the kind of child that gets excited when something new happens? Or are they the kind of child that really gets anxious when the expected thing that's going to happen is now not happening? These are signs of different things. A lot of people with ADHD will love novelty, especially if they're doing their intense interest. Don't interrupt them, at all. Just don't even go there. I saw this a lot when we were on the road traveling to all the national parks in an RV. Yes, that's right. We had 5 kids in an RV. My husband and I were a little crazy. It took us 2 years to visit all the national parks in the USA. But while we were on that big, crazy family adventure, full-time in an RV, I learned that some of my kids loved novelty. They were perfectly fine if the plan for that day was changed, and some of my kids weren't. My autistic children had a harder time with change. Simon especially. So Simon at this time was only 2 years old, 1 year old when we started the trip. But I really noticed when he was 2, he would get so excited about returning back to that RV. I was so grateful that we chose to travel by RV because it really helped both my autistic kids have a place that they could come back to. The RV was our home for a while. They had their own bed to come back to, which was a big deal for them. They would have had a really hard time if we were going from hotel to VRBO or camping. That would have been really difficult. The RV was really good for my autistic kids in many ways. And in one way it was good because then I could cook them the food that they were used to. They really appreciated that. They were used to eating certain food that I cooked. And if we ate out all the time, that would have been a lot harder for my autistic kids. Now my kids with ADHD, they would have been fine with eating out all day, trying different foods in different places and getting to know the people there. That novelty would have even motivated them. They would have been excited about it. So those are 2 very different behaviors with people who have ADHD and people who are autistic. And when we traveled in the RV full time, we learned a lot. We still have video that we need to put up. We share regularly of our unique normal, so please consider subscribing. Someone who's autistic may have less stress when their day is predictable. In Simon's preschool, he has these cards with certain colors for different activities for the day. And so he'll go up to his card and pull off a picture of story time or a picture of the playground or a picture of the potty because it's time to go potty, and he will know exactly in what order they're going to happen. That visual of the schedule really helps decrease his anxiety. But I know that with my kids with ADHD, if I have a specific strict schedule, they get tired of it fast. Now you're probably wondering, how does Ezra have both? Well, he does. He's been officially diagnosed with ADHD and autism, and that's a whole nother video. We did a video here of 3 signs that it's both ADHD and autism. You'll have to check it out. The second difference is communication and thought process. We have a free guide to help your child communicate. Click the link in the description below to check that out. Is your child's language repetitive or logical? Do they have memorized lines that they say? Are their opinions usually based on facts and not really emotion? That can be more of an autistic way of communicating, thinking, and reasoning. One example of this was just a couple weeks ago. Our son Simon was very mad at me. We were in the kitchen and he's like, "Mommy, I don't want this." I wanted to teach him to not yell and to kind of calm down his emotions. We are working on emotional regulation with him. And so I tried to keep calm and I said, "Simon, how do you say that nicely? You know, it's fine that that's his opinion. I'm glad that he's sharing it, but there are respectful ways to share it, especially since I was trying to give him food and that I had prepared for him. So you can respectfully say, I don't want that, right? But the funny thing is, the crazy thing is that he actually said to me, can I have, I don't want that, please and thank you. Now think about it. The reason he said that was because every time I say, please say it nicely, usually he's asking for something. And he has memorized the words, can I have, and then he says what he wants that he's asking for, please and thank you. And now that he's saying he doesn't want something, he thinks he can use the same exact words that he's memorized, and he thinks it makes sense. So now we have to teach him, okay, if you don't want something, you can say, I don't want that. I don't, please and thank you. I think that's what we taught him. It's a start. He's only 4. He really is learning really fast, and we're really proud of him. But this is an example of an autistic person being very literal and using memorized things to try and communicate. On the ADHD side, if your child's communication, comments, or thread of thought is not really organized in a linear fashion, that's a sign of possible ADHD. Keep in mind that both these autism and ADHD ways of communicating can seem very random to a neurotypical person, but I just want to encourage you to think about how they're thinking. It's not random to them. This is an example that just happened last week. So Ezra was with his therapist, and she was teaching him really patiently and just with a lot of love and kindness. We love her. Teaching him how to point to letters. She was actually having him write a little story. So she would say, who's your character? And then he would point at letters and say bear, B-E-A-R. Okay, the bear. And then she'd write it down. She'd say, the bear looked at what? He looked at, and then Ezra would then pick a different noun. Oh, he looked at the popsicle. He would, actually point at the P-O-P and spell popsicle out. So she'd spell it out. And as they were doing this story, he was waiting for a question from her, right? And then one time when she hadn't asked him a question, so this was purely him initiating, pointing, she hadn't asked him anything, and he pointed to the letters N-O-S-E. Both the therapist and I were like, well, that's really random that he would just spell the word nose. And honestly, it was kind of disappointing as a mom because I was thinking to myself, he's just spelling random words. What he spelled didn't make any sense with the sentence and with the story that we were creating with him. And so I was kind of disappointed, and I was like, okay, now he's just spelling random words. And I was just thinking in my head, when is he gonna realize that he can communicate, right? And then the therapist looked at him and said, oh, you have a runny nose? Let's get a tissue. And I realized that wasn't random at all. And so keep in mind, as a parent, as a teacher or caregiver, your children, whether ADHD or autism or both, are communicating with you. And sometimes you're the one who has to listen a different way. All behavior is communication. The third difference between ADHD and autism is one word: motivation. Now, most people think that ADHD is like the classic kid who cannot sit in a chair and has a really short attention span. Now, that person probably does have ADHD. I don't know. But the kid that's also reading the book by him might have ADHD as well. Because ADHD isn't just about hyperactivity, it's more of hyperactivity of the brain as well. And it is a motivation disorder. I want you to say that to yourself. ADHD is a motivation disorder. Let us know what you think about our list. Please put in the comments if you have another difference between ADHD and autism. You never know whose life you might bless simply by sharing and commenting below. Here are 5 ADHD motivators that are worth mentioning: intense interests, novelty, urgency, a challenge, or passion. So if something seems really challenging, maybe it's something no one has ever done before. That might be really motivating for someone with ADHD. Maybe an ADHDer just is really passionate about something. They feel really strongly that it's an important message or a certain belief or cause, and they get really into it. And they find a lot of motivation to work hard on that passion project. Here's where ADHD can be very different than autism. A diagnosis of autism includes issues in 3 categories. One is social. You have to have an issue with being social, having a hard time some way with being social. The second one is communication. And the third one is restrictive or repetitive behaviors or interests. Now, issues in these 3 categories can affect your motivation, but they actually don't have to get a diagnosis of autism. So an autistic adult might find it really hard to be motivated to do something because they have sensory overload when they do it. Well, that does directly have to do with their autism, but it's not required to get an autistic diagnosis. So that means there are plenty of autistic people out there who are able to get themselves off the couch and do those mundane daily tasks that need to be done, even if they don't want to do it. That's one big difference between ADHD and autism. Having trouble with motivation is not a diagnostic criteria of autism. All right, here's the last one. This is the one that might be really confusing, and I really want to mention for you because a lot of parents and teachers and caregivers get this one really confused. It looks practically the same on both someone who's autistic and someone who has ADHD. But the reason for it, the underlying reason for the behavior, is actually very different. And that's shutdowns and exhaustion. If you see your child shutting down emotionally, maybe at the end of the day, they're lying on the couch, scrolling through their phone, and they just cannot get up to go brush their teeth. It could be that they have ADHD and that their fearless and somewhat chaotic, impulsive behavior throughout the entire day has just made them completely exhausted. Or it could be that they're autistic, that they've been masking their autistic traits all day to try and fit in socially and try to get by. And they've been overwhelmed and overstimulated the entire day, so they just need a break. Both of these things may look exactly the same, but the reason behind the behavior is different. So with the right conversations, with the right people at the right time, you can find out more about the reason behind your child's behavior if they're shutting down and they're having these moments of intense exhaustion. Here's 5 ways to get your child to communicate, and here's our autism playlist. And remember, if you have an autistic child, you're in good company.